At the invitation of Church Publishing, I'm reading some selections from my book entitled Bits of Heaven, a Summer Companion of Devotionals. Hope it's something you'll add to your library or give as a gift to someone else. I'm reading to you from the inside of St. Martin's Episcopal Church here in Houston, Texas, where I've served as the rector for a little over 12 years. So I appreciate the invitation to share some thoughts and words with you from this book. This is from Meditation 35, entitled, What Do You Do with the Thorns? And I'm going to begin with two readings from Scripture. The first, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me, even considering the exceptional character of the revelations. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. That's from 2 Corinthians 12, verses 6 through 9. Those words of Paul, along with these words of Paul from Galatians 6:11. See what large letters I make when I am writing in my own hand. What do you do with your thorns? A black skimmer is a tern-like seabird that lives along the coast of southern North America and northern South America. One of the reasons for its name is that it gathers its food by flying very low right over the top of the water, then opening its lower mandible and skimming its prey from the water's surface. Ornithologists have noticed an interesting fact about these birds. If taken away from the water and not allowed to skim, the lower mandible will grow beyond its usefulness. The resistance of the water against its lower beak during the skimming actually wears it down such that it becomes more the creature God created it to be. To keep it from this resistance, this wearing down, actually retards nature's way. I became fascinated with skimmers when I honed in on a favorite and secret fishing spot near a jetty along the Gulf Coast of Florida. Whether early in the morning or late in the afternoon, the spot I picked was also a favorite of several of these interesting birds. As I fished, I would watch as they did, and I would return to the spot year after year, learning from them, meditating on this unique process, and coming to the conclusion that for whatever reason, God allows for struggle to be part of the drama of existence. Paul wrote to the Corinthians of a thorn given to him, something that tormented him, and that he had asked God to remove 3 different times. Most scholars believe it might have been poor eyesight, the result of his catching malaria during an early missionary journey. It was Paul's practice to dictate his letters, in all likelihood, due to this thorn. We see at the end of this letter to the Galatians that he's taken the writing instrument from his secretary to write in his own hands with large letters, necessary when writing with poor vision. But as those who knew Paul also knew he had poor eyesight, these were also words of proof that the one writing was Paul. Now, what are your thorns? You may have a physical ailment, or it may be mental or emotional. You may be a poor athlete, but an excellent student, or perhaps an extraordinary athlete of average wit. Some of us get ill and never fully recover. Paul wanted to be rid of his thorns, but God said no. He said no, Paul says, because it was part of who God wanted Paul to be. And as Paul notes, it allowed the power of Christ to be made known more through what he perceived was his own deficiency. I don't think I ever fully understood this until I met my friend Emily during my days as a university chaplain. Emily suffered a bout with rheumatic fever as an infant. And as a fruit of that sickness, her body was racked with rheumatoid arthritis. By the time we met, she had undergone a dozen surgeries. Her limbs were, from my perspective, stunted from their full growth potential. She needed help carrying a lunch tray or walking upstairs, something which most of us would take for granted. I don't think I ever saw Emily without a smile or a good word for another. She was deeply committed to her faith, and I confess I often pondered what I perceived as the unfairness of her challenge. I once asked her if she could change anything about her life, what would it be? And after a pause, she said, "Nothing. I would not change a thing. This disability has demanded that I lean on Christ more and more every single day. I've had to turn to Him every day, and He has become my friend and companion that has enabled me to live with these scars." Emily went on to study theology. She later married, had children, and was ordained and is now a practicing Episcopal priest and rector of her own church. Indeed, Emily showed me how Christ's power can be made perfect in one's weakness. I would later read Helen Keller's words that remind me of Emily's faith. We could never learn to be brave and patient if there were only joy in the world. I guess God could have made an easier way for those skimmers to gobble down their meals, but then they would not be skimmers, would they? God could have removed Paul's thorn, but then Paul would not really be Paul, would he? God could have healed Emily in the wink of an eye, but then others would not have seen the power of Christ in her life, would they? So what do you do with your thorns? A bit of heaven. Spiritualist Anthony de Mello wrote, "Every painful event contains in itself a seed of growth and liberation." We can let thorns define us, or we can invite God into our thorns and then let them refine us. Define or refine. Which would you choose? What thorn do you face this day that you need to take to Christ such that His liberating power can be made known through you? And now a prayer that I have written. Dear Jesus, who knew both despair and joy, acquainted with grief, tears, and pain, but also with laughter and hope and health, come to my aid. Please come to my places of brokenness. Walk through the weaknesses of my body, my mind, my heart, my soul, as you might journey through a desert, and with each step you take, refresh and renew my parched and empty spaces. Where healing I desire accords not with your perfect will, help me to accept my thorns not as a measure of my own worth, but as your gift, so that you may be known even more powerfully through them. As you stepped from hell and death into life and resurrection, so resurrect hells and deaths of my own making and that of others, that I may know you to be the best way, the only truth, and the most perfect life. Amen.